who asks, what can be done regarding parents opting out of any gender and sexuality training? Parentheses, I'm thinking specifically grade 7 health, but if we are doing trans affirming approach at all grades, I'm wondering about potential pushback from many families. You spoke about quite a bit on the Canadian laws, etc. Is this information also in the toolkit? So I think we're in an interesting juncture right now where we're seeing more of these calls to opt out from parents' rights groups. And in many cases, and I know specifically in some of my own personal experiences where these students don't even necessarily want to be pulled from the lessons. It's the parents who are serving as kind of moral arbiters about this. And with the updated 2019 sex education curriculum for grades 1 to 8, there is a provision that school boards have to give parents, I think, 20 school days of notice about sexual health lessons. And then they have to fill out an opt-out form and blah, blah, blah for their child participating in the class. As in terms of what can be done, I would always encourage conversations, if possible, with parents about, there's a lot of myth about what these lessons include. Certainly, I've heard it in my own board about, well, they're doing sex reassignment surgery in classrooms, which is, I would be concerned if that were happening too, right? Like that's not the case. And there's a lot of myth that's being spread through X, formerly known as Twitter, or Reddit, or whatever, about what these lessons entail. So a good starting point is being able to have these conversations with parents about what the intention of the lesson is, why it's important, not just for their student to be a part of it, but for all students to hear about it, how it links to human rights expectations and how it links to policy expectations about supporting students. So to me, a lot of that pushback can be addressed through these more nuanced conversations and doing that work. Part of the affirming approach is doing the work. And again, not just one educator having to do that work or offloading it onto one educator to do that work. It should be an integrated, continued approach to dispelling those myths. I don't know, Wayne or Jen, you want to add to that?
I just wanted to make a distinction between, I think it's helpful to distinguish the health PE sex education curriculum from an integrated approach to addressing gender and sexual diversity, but in this specific case, gender diversity across the curriculum. And, so if I think about an English teacher integrating novel, which includes a trans character or a non-binary character, is a parent going to then ask their child to be removed from that classroom? I think that, I think that what I wanted to say, though, is that I would say that I don't think it's acceptable. And I think that you can't just withdraw someone on the basis of, addressing gender diversity because, it's a nonsense. But within the health and sex ed curriculum, I think there's always been a caveat or an accommodation there. And am I right? Because sex education historically has always induced moral panic, always. And, we had a case of it here with, the revised curriculum, health PE curriculum, sex ed curriculum in Ontario. And I don't have to tell educators in the room about that. And then Ford government was elected, and then they rescinded that progressive curriculum and required everybody to return to the 1998 version of it. But within the context of that sort of backlash, there were discussions. Educators were talking about, well, does that mean I can't address gender diversity within, the English classroom in other areas of the curriculum? So I think that it has to be framed as, all youth need to see themselves represented in the curriculum. Baseline, all human rights, the human rights of all students need to be represented and addressed, right? So, and I see a distinction between, I don't think there is a requirement or an option for something I will investigate, though, and maybe we can look at it. I want to look at that more closely. But as I understand it, you can't just withdraw a student from another area of the curriculum. I don't think that applies.
So I can speak a little bit more to that. And so the folks who are in my class, I'm sorry, you're going to hear this again, but this speaks to the importance of knowing the policy that we're working with. And there are very clear procedures for requesting an accommodation on whatever basis to be removed from the health and physical education. This is only K-8. It doesn't apply to high school. And every single board is going to have procedures put in place. But if you don't know that those procedures exist and you aren't familiar with what that process looks like, then if somebody comes to you and says, I'm yoinking my student from your classroom, you're going to say, okay, I guess, because I don't know any different. And I don't know who to ask at my board about whether or not this is what we're supposed to be doing. So the familiarity and the fluency with policy is critical to understanding what our roles and responsibilities are as educational workers within a school. The second part of that is that the health and physical education is the only one that you can request to be removed from. This does not apply to your day-to-day procedures or lessons at all. In fact, one of the very first lines in the Education Act says that the purpose of education is to create caring citizens. And we cannot do that if we're not learning about folks with identities that we don't hold. And so this is embedded, again, it's a job embedded expectation that every single student see themselves represented, and that students who don't hold that identity, or who are not part of those communities, also learn about them, because that is what helps us create safer spaces for students.